I need to speak with the homeowner about a matter. This is official business. I need someone to come to the door, please. Hello. I know someone's home. I can see the cars in the driveway. Something's not right here. This usually works. Why isn't anyone answering?
A fake sheriff believed he had found the perfect victim, a black family that had just moved in and wouldn't dare question his authority. What he didn't realize was that he was standing face to face with Police Chief Vincent Reynolds and District Judge Camilla Reynolds. Even worse for him, every move he made was being recorded by a camera he never noticed. What happened next exposed him for exactly who he was, and the consequences came fast and without mercy. You won't believe how this situation unfolded. Before we dive into the details of this shocking takedown, we want to take a moment to thank you for being here with us. Your support truly means everything, and we appreciate you choosing to spend your time watching this story. Let us know where you're watching from by dropping your city or country in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. We have many more powerful stories just like this one, and you won't want to miss any of them. Now, let's get into how Vincent and Camilla Reynolds flipped the script on a predator who never saw it coming. Vincent and Camilla Reynolds had worked tirelessly to build the lives they had. Vincent spent 23 years rising through the ranks of law enforcement, earning respect through honesty, discipline, and dedication, until he became the police chief of the Metro District. Camilla followed a different road through the justice system, studying law and serving as a district judge known for her fairness, confidence, and sharp legal judgment. Together, they created a life they were proud of. Their recent move to Riverside Meadows was meant to be a fresh start in a calm and welcoming neighborhood. The home checked every box. It was spacious, quiet, and surrounded by tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. On the surface, it felt like the perfect place to settle down. But Vincent and Camilla weren't naive. They understood that being black in a mostly white neighborhood could sometimes bring challenges, both obvious and hidden. They had lived long enough to know that assumptions could be dangerous, and that staying safe meant staying alert. Because of that, before they had even finished unpacking their boxes, Vincent had a top-of-the-line security system installed around the entire property. At the center of it all was a high-tech doorbell camera discreetly built into the front entrance, watching everything without drawing attention. From the outside, it didn't look like anything special, just a slim, modern panel that blended perfectly into the doorframe. But inside, it delivered crystal-clear video and audio to multiple screens around the house. Vincent could watch every angle of the front entrance from his phone, the kitchen tablet, or the security hub in his home office. To him, it wasn't just technology, it was preparation. Camilla had smiled when Vincent showed her how it worked, joking that he was bringing his job home with him. But she understood why he did it. They both did. In their careers, they had seen too many people become victims simply because they weren't ready. This wasn't fear or paranoia. This was experience speaking. And experience had taught them that getting caught off guard could come at a terrible cost. What neither of them expected was how quickly that system would prove its value. Sometimes preparation meets opportunity in ways you never see coming. For Vincent and Camilla, that moment was only days away. It was never a question of if trouble would show up. It was whether they would be ready when it did. That moment came on a Thursday afternoon just after 3 p.m. Vincent was in his home office reviewing reports when a soft alert chimed on his tablet. He glanced at the screen and immediately noticed movement at the front entrance. A man was walking up to the door, and something about the way he carried himself caught Vincent's attention right away. The man appeared to be wearing a sheriff's uniform, a tan shirt, dark pants, and a badge displayed clearly on his chest. But within seconds, Vincent's trained eye noticed things that didn't add up. The uniform wasn't right. The color was slightly off. The material looked cheap, and the badge placement didn't follow regulation standards. Vincent had worked alongside real county sheriffs for over 20 years. He knew their uniforms down to the smallest details. This one didn't match. The belt held generic gear that didn't look like standard equipment, and the boots were civilian quality, not tactical. Everything about the man pointed to imitation, not legitimacy. Vincent calmly but urgently called out to Camilla. She appeared in the doorway almost instantly, reading the concern on his face without a word. He motioned toward the screen, and she stepped beside him as they watched the man reach the front door. His movements were careful but tense. He kept looking over his shoulder, scanning the street like he was expecting someone to show up. His hand hovered near his side where a weapon should have been, but Vincent noticed the holster looked empty or poorly secured. They stood silently as the man pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed through the house, but neither Vincent nor Camilla moved toward the door. Instead, Vincent opened the security app on his phone, making sure the system was recording everything in the highest resolution. Camilla watched closely, her legal mind already analyzing what they were seeing. This wasn't a legitimate law enforcement visit. There was no warrant, no phone call, and no prior notice. They had done nothing to justify police attention. And even if they had, this wasn't how real officers handle business. The man pressed the doorbell again, harder this time. Through the audio feed, they could hear him muttering under his breath, irritation showing in his body language. Vincent pulled out his personal phone and started typing a message to his deputy chief. What was happening outside wasn't just suspicious, it was criminal. Whoever this man was, he had made a decision that was about to cost him everything. The fake sheriff believed he had chosen his victims carefully. But behind that door were two people who had spent their entire careers studying how criminals think and operate. The hunter had just become the hunted, and he didn't even realize it yet. The man knocked again, louder now, the sound echoing through the entryway. Vincent and Camilla stayed in the office, eyes locked on the screen as they watched his frustration grow. For the first time, they heard his voice clearly through the audio feed. It was loud and commanding, meant to scare and control. He introduced himself as Deputy Sheriff Wallace, claimed there had been reports of suspicious activity at the home, and demanded that someone open the door immediately. Vincent's jaw tightened. The act was familiar. It was the kind of intimidation meant to make innocent people panic and obey without asking questions. It worked especially well on families who had just moved in who didn't want trouble, and who feared that challenging authority could make things worse. This man had done this before, and he had likely gotten away with it many times. Camilla watched with the same sharp focus she used in her courtroom. She noticed how he stood to make himself look bigger, how his hand kept drifting toward the empty holster as a psychological threat, and how his confident tone barely hid the desperation underneath. She had heard enough criminals testify to recognize when someone was acting instead of speaking from real authority. Vincent had already sent the message to his deputy chief, including their address and a brief explanation of what was happening. A response came back in less than 30 seconds. Units were on the way. Estimated arrival time, 6 minutes. Vincent replied with clear instructions. No sirens. Approach quietly. Position officers on both ends of the street to block any escape. He knew exactly how people like this behaved. The moment they sensed danger, they ran. And Vincent wasn't going to let that happen. On the screen, the fake sheriff's attitude changed. The fake authority gave way to open threats. He announced that if the door wasn't open within 60 seconds, he would have legal grounds to force entry. It was a complete lie, but it made his plan clear. He was relying on fear and confusion to get inside, where he could take control and grab whatever he came for. Camilla placed a steady hand on Vincent's shoulder, a silent exchange they had perfected over years together. They were thinking the same thing. How many families had believed this act? How many people had opened their doors because they trusted a uniform that was supposed to protect them? The anger was there, calm but powerful, pushing them to see this through. Vincent checked the time. 4 minutes until backup arrived. The man was still outside, clearly losing patience. Through the camera, they watched him test the door handle, applying just enough pressure to see if it would move. That single action confirmed everything Vincent already knew. This wasn't law enforcement. This was a criminal scouting his target, and he had just proven intent on camera. The trap was set. All that remained was waiting for it to close. The man's frustration was now obvious. His movements became sharper, less controlled. He stepped back and studied the front of the house, his eyes moving across the windows as if searching for another way in. Vincent tracked every motion, already preparing the testimony he would later give. This was reconnaissance, the behavior of someone adjusting plans after the easy option failed. Then, through the audio feed, they heard him speak again. This time, he claimed he had reason to believe someone inside the home needed medical assistance. That it was a new tactic, a different form of manipulation meant to create urgency and fake legal justification for forcing his way inside. Camilla slowly shook her head, instantly recognizing it for what it was. In her courtroom, she had heard countless criminals use the same excuse-filled logic. The pattern never changed. Create a story that makes something illegal sound necessary. Vincent's phone buzzed in his hand. A message from his deputy chief, 2 minutes away. 4 units already positioned around the perimeter, awaiting your signal. Vincent typed back one word. Wait. He wanted the man to go further, to cross a line that would leave no doubt about criminal intent. Patience wasn't easy, but it was essential. The fake sheriff shifted to the side of the door and leaned toward the decorative glass panel next to the frame, trying to peer inside. His face was now close enough for the camera to capture every detail clearly. The sharp, calculating eyes, the thin scar above his left eyebrow, the way his mouth twisted with frustration. It was the face of someone used to getting what he wanted through lies and intimidation, someone who had never truly faced consequences. Then he made his biggest mistake. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tool, a slim metal device made for bypassing locks. Vincent recognized it immediately. A lockpick set, the kind sold online and used almost entirely for illegal break-ins. The man glanced around again, checking the street for witnesses, then dropped to one knee and began working on the door lock. That was the point of no return. Vincent sent the message. Move in now. Suspect attempting forced entry. On the screen, the fake sheriff stayed focused on the lock, completely unaware that 8 officers were closing in from multiple directions. He had entered the property under false pretenses, impersonated law enforcement, made threats, and was now actively trying to break into their home. Camilla stood beside Vincent, calm but determined. She had overseen hundreds of criminal cases, but this was different. This was personal, and it was happening live. In less than a minute, this man would learn what it meant to target the wrong people. He had built his crimes on fear and fake authority, never imagining he would face someone who understood the system better than he ever could. Footsteps suddenly echoed nearby, fast and deliberate. The fake sheriff heard them too late. He looked up from the lock, just as the first officer rounded the corner, weapon drawn, badge clearly visible. In an instant, reality hit him hard. His face shifted from focused concentration to pure panic. Instinct took over. He dropped the lockpick and bolted off the porch, sprinting toward the side yard. But Vincent's officers were already in place. As the man turned the corner of the house, 2 more officers stepped into view, blocking his escape. He spun around sharply, nearly losing his footing, and ran toward the back fence. Vincent and Camilla moved to the rear window, watching the chase unfold across their own backyard. The man ran fast, fueled by adrenaline and fear. He reached the fence and grabbed the top rail, pulling himself up with desperate strength. He didn't make it. Officer Chen reached him just in time, grabbing his belt and yanking him backward. The fake sheriff slammed into the ground, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Within seconds, 4 officers surrounded him. He struggled to get up, but Officer Rodriguez pressed a knee into his back while pulling his arms behind him to secure the cuffs. Now the man was yelling. He claimed he was law enforcement, demanded they check his credentials, insisted it was all a misunderstanding. His voice cracked with panic, the sound of someone watching their entire scheme fall apart. Vincent stepped out the back door, his real badge visible on his belt. His presence immediately changed the energy of the scene. The fake sheriff looked up and saw him, saw the genuine badge, the calm authority, the certainty in Vincent's eyes. In that moment, he understood exactly who he had targeted. The protest stopped. Defeat replaced panic. Officer Chen held up an evidence bag containing the lockpick set recovered from the porch. Vincent nodded, then gestured toward the man on the ground. "Run his prints. Check for warrants. Full background," Vincent said calmly. "I want everything on who he is and what he's been doing." The officers lifted the man to his feet and began the formal arrest. As they read him his rights, he stood there in his fake uniform, the costume that once gave him power, now exposing him as what he truly was, a fraud and a criminal. They escorted him toward the patrol cars parked out front. Neighbors stepped outside their homes, drawn by the flashing lights and movement. Curious faces watched as justice unfolded. Camilla joined Vincent in the front yard. As officers placed the man into the back of a patrol car, she observed quietly, with the trained eyes of a judge who had seen many criminals face consequences. But this time, there was a personal sense of satisfaction. This man had come to their home expecting easy victims, people too afraid to question him. Instead, he had found two people who had dedicated their lives to protecting others from predators just like him. Deputy Chief Morrison approached Vincent holding a tablet, his expression serious. "Chief, we ran some early checks," the deputy chief said. "This guy has been on our radar for 3 months. We've received multiple reports about someone pretending to be law enforcement and targeting new families in wealthy neighborhoods across 3 counties. We have 7 confirmed cases so far, and there are likely more that were never reported. Families who were too scared or too embarrassed to come forward. We've been searching for him, and he just walked straight into your house." Vincent looked toward the patrol car, where the man sat handcuffed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Then he turned back to his deputy chief. Sometimes justice carried a sense of irony that felt almost scripted. The predator had finally chosen the wrong target, and the hunt was over. The interrogation room at the precinct was cold, bare, and unforgiving. It was designed to remove any sense of power and leave only the truth behind. The man who had called himself Deputy Sheriff Wallace now sat across from Detective Laura Brennan. His fake uniform was gone, replaced by standard jail clothing. His real name was Trevor Hodges. His criminal record stretched back more than 10 years, filled with charges like theft, fraud, impersonation, and burglary. He had moved in and out of the system for years, each sentence failing to stop him, only teaching him how to improve his schemes. Detective Brennan laid out the evidence piece by piece. The doorbell camera footage told the full story. It showed Trevor approaching the house, flashing fake credentials, making threats, and attempting to pick the lock. The video quality was crystal clear, capturing every movement, every expression, and every tool in his hands. There was no room for denial, and no way to twist the facts. The technology he never noticed had recorded everything with courtroom-ready accuracy. As investigators dug deeper, Trevor's strategy became obvious. He bought fake law enforcement uniforms online and studied real police procedures just enough to appear believable. Then he targeted families who had recently moved into upscale neighborhoods. New residents were the perfect targets. They didn't know their neighbors yet. They weren't familiar with local police practices, and many were too focused on fitting in to risk filing a complaint that might make them seem paranoid or difficult. His method was simple but effective. He would arrive claiming to investigate suspicious activity or to follow up on issues tied to previous homeowners. Once inside, he would quickly scan for valuables, make excuses to walk through different rooms, and mentally map the house. Sometimes he stole items during the first visit if the chance presented itself. Other times, he returned later, using the fear he had already planted, and the knowledge he'd gathered about the home's layout. The 7 confirmed cases Detective Brennan mentioned were only the beginning. As officers reached out to families in the affected neighborhoods, more victims began to speak up. A Nigerian couple who had been too afraid to report what happened. An Indian family who believed they had misunderstood how American police operate. A Hispanic family who feared immigration problems, even though they were legal residents. Trevor had turned people's vulnerabilities into weapons, their unfamiliarity with their new communities, their cultural uncertainty, their fear of authority. He used all of it to his advantage and turned it into profit. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Beyond the doorbell footage, officers recovered fake uniforms from his apartment, lockpicking, tools, stolen property linked to earlier victims, and detailed notes about future targets. Trevor had operated with precision, almost like a professional. But his planning failed in one crucial way. He never imagined that one of his targets would understand the justice system better than he did. Vincent gave his statement with the confidence of someone who had testified countless times before. He described every detail, every inconsistency in Trevor's uniform, and every behavior that revealed criminal intent. Camilla prepared her own statement with equal care. Her legal expertise ensured that nothing important was missed and that every detail was properly documented. For prosecution, the district attorney's office built a case that was nearly impossible to break. Trevor faced multiple charges, including impersonating a law enforcement officer, attempted burglary, possession of burglary tools, theft, fraud, and several related offenses. Together, those charges added up to a possible prison sentence measured in years, not months. Trevor's public defender had very few options. Taking the case trial would mean playing the doorbell camera footage in front of a jury, footage that showed every step of his crime. Still, there would be no plea deal. The district attorney made that decision clear from the start. This case was going to trial, and it was meant to send a strong message to anyone who believed they could exploit people's trust in law enforcement for personal gain. What Trevor didn't know yet was which judge had been assigned to his case. That detail would soon be revealed. And when it was, the irony would be complete. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Trevor Hodges' trial. News of the case had spread quickly. A fake sheriff who had targeted a police chief and a judge drew serious attention. Journalists filled the gallery, along with community members and several of Trevor's previous victims who had finally found the courage to speak out. The bailiff called the court to order, and everyone stood as the judge entered. Trevor looked up from the defense table, and the color drained from his face. Judge Camilla Reynolds took her seat at the bench. Her expression was calm and professional as her eyes met his with quiet recognition. The same woman whose door he had stood at, whose home he had tried to violate, was now the person who would decide his fate. Trevor's attorney leaned in to whisper, but Trevor barely heard him. The full weight of his mistake was now impossible to ignore. Camilla formally disclosed her personal involvement in the case and offered to step aside if the defense requested it. But Trevor's attorney understood how damaging that request would look, asking the judge to recuse herself because his client had tried to rob her home would sound like an admission of guilt before the trial even began. They chose to proceed, trusting Camilla's well-known reputation for fairness, even in a case that affected her personally. The prosecution presented its case with careful precision. The doorbell camera footage played across screens throughout the courtroom. Jurors watched Trevor approach the house, wearing his fake uniform, making aggressive demands, and finally attempting to pick the lock. Several jurors shook their heads as the footage played. The evidence was powerful, not just because of what it showed, but because of how clearly it showed it. Vincent testified next. His experience and credentials added weight to his explanation of the uniform's inconsistencies and the suspect's suspicious behavior. Other victims took the stand as well, sharing their encounters with Trevor and revealing a pattern of manipulation and intimidation aimed at exploiting trust and fear. The defense argued that Trevor had never successfully entered any homes, claiming his actions showed intent rather than completed crimes. But the attempted break-in at the Reynolds residence destroyed that argument. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Trevor sat still as each guilty verdict was read aloud. For the first time, the consequences of his actions seemed to truly sink in. heavier than any previous arrest he had faced. Sentencing took place 2 weeks later. Camilla listened carefully as the prosecution outlined their recommendations. The defense asked for leniency, and victims spoke about how Trevor's actions had shattered their sense of safety in their own homes. Then she delivered her sentence with the same steady authority she brought to every case. Trevor Hodges was sentenced to 12 years in state prison, with no chance of parole for the first 8. The sentence reflected the seriousness of his crimes, the number of victims, the violation of public trust, and the calculated nature of his actions. It was designed not only to punish, but to protect future communities from a predator who had shown he would refine his methods rather than change his behavior. As bailiffs led Trevor out of the courtroom, Camilla watched with calm focus. There was no anger or satisfaction in her expression. Justice to her was never about revenge. It was about accountability and protection. Trevor had built his crimes on the belief that certain people were too vulnerable, too uncertain, and too afraid to push back. He learned too late that those assumptions were dangerous. Vincent and Camilla left the courthouse that afternoon knowing they had done more than defend their own home. Every victim who testified reclaimed power Trevor had tried to steal. Every news report would make the next predator think twice. And every family moving into a new neighborhood would have one more reason to believe the system could work when people refused to be victims. The doorbell camera that captured everything remained installed at their home, still recording, still watching. It stood as a reminder that preparation and awareness are not paranoia. They are responsibility. Sometimes the strongest defense against those who exploit trust is simply being ready when they come knocking. So here's the question for you. Do you think 12 years was enough for someone who systematically targeted families and abused their trust? What would you have done if you were in Vincent and Camilla's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story reminded you why it's important to stand up against injustice, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we have more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with the worst sides of humanity. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, justice doesn't always come easily, but it's always worth fighting for.